Thomas Jefferson Alumni Action Group, or TJAG. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the See It, Be It speaker series. Lewis Academy Now and TJAG are thrilled to present this programming together as two organizations striving towards equity in education here in Fairfax County and beyond. TJAG is a group of more than 1,000 TJ alumni that seek to enhance accessibility, inclusion, and innovation within STEM education in order to develop well-rounded and ethical 21st century leaders. Lewis Academy Now represents hundreds of community members, parents, and students, and is an independent organization formed to bring an academy for public policy, government, and human rights to Fairfax County's John R. Lewis High School. Academies in Fairfax County Public Schools offer specialized courses that combine academic and career preparation. The Lewis Academy would be a nonpartisan program designed to encourage civic engagement and develop student awareness of the processes of change through various forms of federal, state, and local government. But enough about us, let's get started. Tonight's conversation is available in English and Spanish. To hear the Spanish interpreter, look for the globe icon along your bottom menu and select your preferred language. We'll be recording tonight's discussion, and though your fellow audience members won't be visible, your questions will be recorded as well. In addition, you'll want a smartphone or similar device handy towards the end so you can join in the game of Kahoot, which will be explained later. So without further ado, please welcome Jorge Tarico of TJAG and of our See It, Be It speaker series. Welcome.
Esther, thank you so much for that welcome, and I'm so pleased to be here. I'm thankful for the opportunity that being a part of the TJ Alumni Action Group and partnering with Lewis Academy Now has offered me, and especially because right now I get to welcome another fellow TJ grad who is actually making such a big difference in our local community. I'd like to please present Supervisor Dalia Palchik for the Providence District. Thank you so much for being here with us, Dalia.
My pleasure, Jorge. Always a pleasure to see you and to be here representing our community.
Yes, it's incredible that we've gotten this opportunity to, one, get to know each other, and it's been really inspiring to learn about what you're doing. And I'm super happy that you are now part of this See It, Be It series where we can really help our middle school and high school student audience learn about how you got to where you're at, what motivated you, and ultimately how they can see themselves in that type of career as well. So again, it's a pleasure and testament for Northern Virginia that you are here, you present our community. And would you please share a little bit about your life, your key educational experiences that you had from your youth that ultimately provided you with the experiences to be so uniquely qualified to serve our local community here in the Providence District?
Sure, absolutely, Jorge. It's a pleasure and placer. And I guess the best thing is really for me to start a little bit about my background. So I was born in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. And when I was about 6.5 years old, my dad, who moved here to the US looking for a more stable economic and political atmosphere. And in about 2 weeks, we had to move our family here. My uncle had already moved here, escaped in the 70s during the military dictatorship in Argentina. And so we followed. My dad arrived first and he spoke English and he was an architect. My mom spoke no English, couldn't drive, had raised 4 kids, hadn't worked outside of the home in a long time, and hadn't flown alone. And she brought me, I was 6.5. I didn't speak any English. I only knew how to say yes. And my baby sister, who was 1.5 at the time. And I had 2 brothers who were in middle school. It doesn't exist there, but they were that age, middle school age. And they waited a bit longer to finish the school year there, which many of you know, in the Southern Hemisphere, we have the flipped calendar. And so we arrived not really knowing how long, we'd be able to stay. It was on temporary visas. We were fortunate to have those. And then in 1992, with the first lottery for visas, Argentina was included. And my family was so fortunate. Though we didn't know at the time what it would be, my mom waited for a whole week outside of the Merrifield post office here, where I now have my campaign account. And luckily we did. We entered, I think, 500 letters that year. Knowing at the time my dad had lost his job, things were really unsure of how we'd be able to stay or we'd have to go back. And as many of you know, and it's only gotten harder since then, once you're able to really have a little bit more security, knowing your, immigration status, it meant that, we sold our house there and really started a life here. And my parents bought their very first home here in Providence District in Mantua, where they still live. So that was personally some of my story. But I know you asked about education, which I love. So I love school. I always love school. I love learning and learning languages and talking to people. But like I said, I was in it used to be called ESL growing up here. I was able to move out of that pretty quickly. My brothers were in middle school, but luckily they had learned English from my grandmother, so they were able to catch up a little bit. But I know my brother wasn't able, like myself, to apply and make it into TJ because of his English scores. But I love school, so I went to school every day, regular school. On Saturday, I would go to Argentina school in Maryland, and on Sundays, I would go to Hebrew school. So education's definitely a place where I know it's not the same for everyone, and where I really felt at home and knew that there were a lot of challenges, but I had some really incredible teachers and staff who supported me in areas that were most challenging. So those were the main areas. And then wasn't sure, but TJ was not something I ever thought I wanted to do. I liked math. I hadn't thought that I was any good at science at the time. But I really, really enjoyed school, and I visited. I was able to do the Visions program in 7th grade, which I think is, Jorge, I think you know it well.
Yeah. Wow. So it's incredible how, our experiences are very parallel. I mean, I was myself an immigrant from Bolivia, right next door to Argentina. And on top, same thing, my dad brought our family over looking for better economic opportunity. So you were 6 years old when you moved here? Wow. And so they had ESL for you when you first moved over for like kindergarten, or how was that?
Yeah, so that was the thing. I had to take the tests, and since I was, since it was half a year off, I either had to skip half a year or go back and repeat half a year. My brothers, I think they had to repeat half a year. I can't remember, but I had, like I said, loved school. My mom had taught me the alphabet and then told me to put the words together so I could read in Spanish when I came. And my other brother, who then became a banker, taught me math, pretending to be a banker. And so luckily I was able, it was still at the Loring Center, I think hadn't been open long. Some of you and your families may know it. I had my English and math test there. And so I was able to start, I believe, in the middle of first grade at that point. So it was halfway through first grade.
Wow.
So yeah, it was hard. Definitely, I remember my first day was really, really scary. As you know, in Argentina and lots of our families, we're very close. It's all about being comfortable with each other there. I think my mom stayed with me at preschool for a month until I let her go. Here, I still remember my very first day of first grade, not understanding a word of what was happening. They walked me into the classroom. My parents are behind me. I go in, I open the door. It was a really cool teacher, and they were dancing and, doing a lot of movement at that time. I went up to see them. As soon as I turned around to look for my parents, they had already taken
Oh, goodness.
and the kind of, shock and experience that definitely, is still with me and was very hard at the time.
Wow. Well, I mean, you also share that immigrant experience with so much of our community. And, I think you touched on it a little bit, but I want to go back to it. So a lot of kids listening may be really impressed that you went to TJ's, to Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology, given that right now it's a school that historically has been so hard to get into and has become only harder to get into. So you mentioned the Visions program. Tell us a little bit about how you heard about that program, how you heard about TJ, and ultimately what prompted you to apply and attend.
Yeah. So I don't remember how I heard about visions. It was a couple of decades ago, but I do remember that when I did go, and I'm the kind of person who I say yes to almost anything. um, and so especially if it's new experiences like that. And so I did decide to go. I did have a friend of mine who was a year older, and so I kind of followed her in some ways. But for visions, I think probably I was told about it. It sounded really cool. I love, I used to my uncle lived in Richmond, so when we used to go visit, we would go to the Virginia Science Center, which is really hands-on science, and that's the kind we weren't really learning in school those days, and experiencing that and doing that kind of work in visions was really exciting. And some of the people I met there, one of them became one of my best friends in high school. And so, the social component, and those of us who are especially social people, um, you know, understanding what it was, I probably wouldn't have applied had I not had that experience in person, seeing who was there and seeing that there were other kids and people like me. I know growing up here, now we really celebrate diversity, and I know there's a lot of work we need to do, but I don't know for you, Jorge, for me at the time, it definitely felt like I hid that I was an immigrant as soon as I could, as soon as I learned English, tried to, I was ashamed when my parents came to school and people heard their accent. I learned to fill out all the forms, paperwork for my mom, even write the check for her to sign, and try to make it as many of you as easy as possible for them, which also is hard for them. But, I know it definitely felt like there were other kids like me who loved school and learning, and many of them did come from very international backgrounds.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to those experiences because, I mean, my dad did speak English as well when we first came, but my mom did not, right? And although they were professionals back in Bolivia, they were not practicing the professions when they came here. So yeah, I mean, I used to go by George because of that, because I wanted to fit in, right? But oddly enough, the move to TJ for me was what prompted me to like have this opportunity to reset and say, no, my identity for me particularly was Jorge. I am Jorge, and that was, I think, fostered by that program Visions, which again was for Black, Latino, under low-income students as well, and Native American youth. So when you were at TJ or as you were younger, so were you a science and math person? What were your favorite subjects and what were you thinking you were going to be? Did you see yourself in what you do now?
So that's funny. It's funny that you mentioned my parents is professional. So my parents in Argentina met in architecture school. And I don't know if Bolivia is like Argentina, different from our system here, right? Where it was free, but once you're on a track, it's almost impossible to change, right?
Yeah.
And so my dad went through, he finished and then he did urban planning, which funny enough is a lot of what my job is today. But my mom, she followed her brother and their parents were immigrants there, followed him to architecture school. It was not, the right program for her. And so, she dropped out and she didn't finish. And she took a few sort of I remember I went with her to this church to take some baking classes in Buenos Aires. So she had a little bit of that. She had started baking cakes. So when we moved here, my dad, at the time, it was a difficult economic situation, and he was often lost his job. So as soon as we got our citizenship, or first residency, our green card, he started his own small business doing contracting work, and my mom was doing small catering. And so I spent a lot of time with them and learned a lot, but also felt that those weren't the professions I wanted. And I remember my sixth grade teacher, I just adored her. It was the first time I really felt like someone understood me from a different culture. She had a Greek family, but really made me feel normal and accepted and, and proud to be who I was. And so from that day on, I wanted to be a teacher. That's what I wanted to do.
So yeah, I like, so there wasn't a particular subject matter. It was just,
Sorry. Yeah. So I loved math. I think until I got to algebra two, I loved math. Well, at TJ, I think it definitely felt like, oh, I used to be really, really good at math. And now, it didn't feel like I was as good as I thought. And like I said, I loved learning. I didn't feel comfortable in reading and writing because, it was my second language. And I think we taught it a little bit differently. And I didn't feel as secure in reading and writing. But I love math. I love people. Later on, I learned anthropology and social sciences were love, but I didn't know that earlier. But yeah, again, so math was absolutely something I loved. And And I did enjoy reading a lot. I just felt like I was slower at it compared to a lot of other kids.
So now you're getting ready to graduate, TJ. You know, you went at that point in time, was already a recognized nationally recognized school. Where did you go to college afterwards? What did you study, and what prompted it? Or did you change majors a couple times? How was that for you? Oddly enough, I'll mention just for me, I was looking to go to architecture school at UVA at first, but then I changed my major also.
Yeah, and it's funny because I don't know in Bolivia here, you know, there's like an architect often signs off on a lot of projects. You don't have as many architects. In Argentina, every project has an architect and an engineer. So we had in our family, everybody had an architect in their family. Yeah, no, so I did not know, you know, I knew I was interested in education. I loved working with kids. And I did that, you know, as early as I could and worked in summer camps and loved doing that. And at TJ, right, there was a lot I really loved and I loved chemistry. But then as I went up, I actually did the lab that I think no longer exists, was the video tech lab, and I interned my senior year with someone I now work with, and we used to tape school board meetings with Channel 21. So, and that was my very first internship. But I also took Spanish and French that year. I decided, unlike some of my friends at TJ who took extra science labs, I continued learning French because I went with my dad when I was in 5th grade. I loved it, to visit his pen pal, and then I wanted to take Spanish literature because I hadn't formally taken Spanish, and so I decided to do both, and I loved them. And I thought I wanted to do international relations, maybe. I wanted to do education, you know, I wanted to teach, but I didn't know what I wanted to teach. And I knew I wanted to be able to study abroad and a place I could afford. And so I applied to several schools. At the end, I was between, and the scholarships are very important, and the financial aid, was able to get enough financial aid from Tufts University up in Boston that equaled what I would have had to pay to go to UVA. And I wanted to get out of Virginia. And what I loved about Tufts is as soon as I visited, it was all about the global perspective. They have a course called Education for Public Inquiry and International Citizenship. And I just fell in love. And I actually cried at the financial aid office and they gave me more money so I could go. I don't know if that works, but.
Wow. Well, that's incredible. I mean, and it's, how did your family, or how did you navigate going to college first generation in the US? You know, your parents are educated, but like that was a big thing for us as well. Like not knowing, even visiting colleges. I didn't go to visit any colleges because that was an expense in and of itself. Let alone, you know, going on the spring break trip to visit like 10 colleges like people did in our school. Or even applying. I only applied to 3 schools because I was like, we can't afford to apply to too many applications. How did you navigate that? And certainly you mentioned a little bit about the financial aid and how that plays a significant role. Similar for me as well, and I'm sure it's similar for many people, especially considering how much education has increased in its overall cost. But yeah, tell us a little bit about that and how that was for you.
Yeah, so you know, I was a little bit fortunate compared to my brothers who were in middle school when we moved here, and a much more. I mean, my dad was making $20,000 a year for a family of 6. You know, but that also meant they were able to get, you know, full scholarships. But it was harder. They didn't have as much time to navigate the system and know where to go. And then for me, you know, at that time, my dad's small business had improved and grown a little bit. I think when I got to high school was the first time, you know, they weren't saying no to everything. You know, I could go on some trips. It was a big change. You know, it used to be our summer vacations were camping 2 hours, half an hour from the beach, you know, for 2 weeks and bringing sandwiches to the beach. And all of a sudden we could maybe stay in a hotel room, which was a big change. And so, yeah, I was fortunate that by the time I got there, we had a little bit more experience, you know, really friends and support and family. And it was actually, I hadn't heard of Tufts, but my friend who's a year older had gone up there, told me to check it out, that I might like it. And I did. But right, applying, you know, I actually applied to a lot because that way I could use the different packages and negotiate. Yeah, and I think they had fee reductions. I don't remember at this point when you were on free and reduced meals. And so, but it was a little bit scary. I know my junior year, so my freshman year in high school, I don't know if you had this, first quarter was the first time in my whole life I got, I think, a C on a report card because I had to really work and study, and I wasn't used to that. By my sophomore year, I was working really hard and could get really good grades and had it figured out. And junior year was so tough. That's where I developed asthma and health problems, and I know so much stress and tension. My favorite club, one of my favorite clubs, was the Learn to Relax Club, led by an excellent counselor. But it was hard. I didn't realize, and it's still hard in this area. We all work so hard to know how to balance and bring in health into our lives. So that was hard, and not really knowing, right? Not, I know I went all the way. I got a lot of free trips. I remember that for diversity students. So got flown to Duke University and a few others, and didn't really feel at home and until I got to Tufts, and it just felt right. It felt like a place where I felt comfortable.
Wow. You're right. My freshman year in high school, my first D plus, oddly enough, was in Spanish.
Oh no.
I jumped to Spanish 3, but I didn't know how to conjugate or where to put accents. So bad. But yeah, so the international environment in Boston made you feel at home. You were able to navigate and ultimately find your place there. You mentioned a little bit how, for your senior tech project, you did the Channel 21 taping school board meetings. So I can see that as a beginnings of an encounter with public service or the public, advocacy space. Did you have similar experiences while in Boston, or were you on a totally different tangent and then came back in both geographically and as well as your career to being in public service?
Yeah, it's interesting because I I felt like it was not at all what I was thinking I would do. It definitely felt like I wanted to leave the area, be a place that was more diverse, and we've changed a lot here now, but not just diverse, right? But also celebrating that diversity, which we do now. And I wasn't sure what I wanted. I always knew I wanted to serve. I knew I enjoy helping people and fixing problems and addressing issues around poverty. I thought I was much more interested in doing that globally around the world, and being able to continue to travel. I did that a little bit in my life. I ended up majoring. I fell in love with an anthropology class, so majored in anthropology and French. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but then and I studied abroad and came back, and I still wasn't really sure. And I kind of fell into. I had taken some micro finance classes, and fell into that field of poverty internationally, and I really enjoyed the work. But I'm someone who, I don't know, like if you're like that, Jorge, I left, and I get so homesick because this is home. This is I want to be near my family, near my parents, and my community. And finally decided, all right, well, I want to make my community better. But before I got there, I worked internationally, and then I taught. I actually went back and did pre-med classes. I had to do physics again, but because I wanted to find a way to serve and have work anywhere I went, and be able to help people. But it decided medicine was not my avenue, but I like everything. And so now going backwards, it makes sense looking back that my job is to be a generalist, to be able to solve problems, to understand everything that's needed to make a whole healthy community, and to bring in this voice and perspective, being the first Latina on our board, hopefully not the last, and bringing in more diverse voices and of where our county is going and what our kids and families need now. But looking back, I was used to being behind the camera. I interpreted for international, Nobel laureates and celebrities, but I never thought that I would, and that those jobs were training me and giving me skills that I use every day. But absolutely, without some of those opportunities, an internship in high school, I did a Smithsonian research training internship in college. All of those, for me, like many of you, had to be paid. So I had to look for internships that were paid. And so never imagined the political field felt like you had to be in you have to be able to afford to live on little or nothing. And it's just not anything that I considered. But my languages and my desire to do this work gave me the opportunity to have internships that turn into jobs in really community development work. And that's what I feel like I do today.
What's incredible is I listened to you to hear how, your dad being an architect, that perspective on housing, coming again from, I'm guessing in Argentina, you were more in the urban areas, and then, going to Boston, another urban area, at the same time being perfectly like positioned for the growth that our area has encountered. I think even in the past 20 years, something like over 50 or 60% population growth in our area. And apart from that, just having the international perspective. So you speak Spanish, French, English, obviously. Is there any other language?
So a little bit of Italian. I took some classes in college, and I taught at the American school in the Italian part of Switzerland for a couple of years. And Italian, if you speak Spanish or French, Italian's a lot easier. It has the simplest conjugation and grammar. And I can read Hebrew. I used to get mad that we didn't learn Hebrew in Hebrew school. So, but my mom always reminded me, and I love to read, which I fell in love in AP Spanish Lit. And one of our Borges, one of our most famous authors, I think he learned Japanese in his 80s when he was blind. And so, and I remember when we visited Monticello, I believe Thomas Jefferson learned 5 languages so that he didn't have to read translations. So that was my goal when I first heard that. I'm not there yet.
That's awesome. The lifelong learning definitely is something that's incredible and important. So now you came back, you're in the area. What got you into this path? So the first step is you ran for school board, right? And it was that 2015, was it?
Yeah.
So yeah, what made you decide to do that? Like, how did you get there?
Yeah, so again, I had no idea. I had never volunteered on a campaign. I didn't know what canvassing meant. I didn't know what it took. I imagined, in school, some of you may have, I lost every election I ran for in school. I was like, this is not for me. I had a lot of friends who did that and were, presidents. And I was like, those are political people. They're going to do this. I am too shy. I don't have those skills is what I felt. And I didn't feel safe. I thought you had to be an excellent orator and debater and know everything about everything to be able to do that. That's not the case. You have to care. You have to be like people and solving problems and wanting to make this a better community. At least that's what I think it should be. And so at the time I was teaching, I had come back from doing the international work, not sure, realizing that, I wanted to be in my community. I liked teaching younger children. I got to teach at a K-8 school. I was there for 5 years teaching Spanish and French and being able to create the curriculum around the work that I had done internationally. And that was really exciting. And I thought to myself, why haven't we done this in Fairfax yet? We were so ahead of the game in education and some of this curriculum. And I felt like it hasn't changed that much. And we have, these programs could be so robust. As a teacher, I knew how hard it was to be able to afford to live in DC. And I moved back home. I wanted to be closer to home. And then here as well as, my first condo cost what my parents paid for their first home here in Mantua, which now is so incredibly expensive. I couldn't even imagine buying a home there. And so I loved what I was doing in the classroom, but I felt that I wanted to do a little bit more. I wanted to move beyond just the classroom and be able to impact the lives of teachers, of the community, the needs of families. And I had a colleague who interned one summer for a state senator, her senator. I was like, oh, you can do that? That's so cool. And so I didn't know anyone in politics. A friend of my sister's I knew was working in state politics. I was like, how do I get involved? How do I intern for someone? And like many women and many women of color, we just had an event. Most of us have to be tapped. And so he said to me, no, you shouldn't be interning. You need to run for school board. So it took me about a year. I went and canvassed for the first time for someone who's now my colleague, John Faust, when he was running for Congress. And And I realized running for office is not about just being a comfortable orator, right? It really was about having one-on-one conversations. And for me, the main thing is introducing myself, but then asking everyone else, asking them, asking you, what do you care about? What do you see in your community that you want to improve? What are the issues that you value? And one by one, 14,000 homes at a time, understanding, what my community wants, what they need, what works, what isn't working, and that gave me the strength to do that. But then finally, when I finally decided, okay, why me and not someone else, right? Like you said, I grew up in Buenos Aires, urban areas. We take the buses everywhere there. This was the first place. I don't know for me, for my mom, it was so hard not being able to drive and get around here. So I knew as soon as I could, I got a license because that meant, right, transportation. But that's not the way it should be. But I was taking the bus to go to work. I used to take the bus to the metro when I worked in DC, and it was in December, and there were these two women sitting in the bus in front of me speaking Spanish, and one of them, they were taking the bus from Springfield up to Tyson's, the 401, those of you who take the connector, and talking about, their races and the holidays they were getting. She said, 50 centavos, see, they're going to give me 50-cent raise. Yeah, me too. And then she goes, well, and I would take my 2-week vacation, but I can't because I have my other part-time job. And she said, and I've looked at a cheaper place to live, so I don't have to do that. But my son loves his school. He's so happy, and I don't want to move him. And that was the moment. If there's one moment, that was the moment. My heart sank to my stomach. I said, it's not for me. It's for them. They need a voice. There are many qualified people, but there's no one sharing their voice and what they and their families need. So that's when I put my hat in the ring, and here we are today.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. I use the buses myself, and you get to meet people, you get to hear conversations, you get to really understand others apart from yourself, and that's incredible. So when you were in the school board, what was one of your signature items that you cared most about or that you really worked for? And how do you feel that went? And what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, so I mean, the number one thing we passed, and I was fortunate that by the time I joined the school board, it was a lot of the policy had been created, and we passed the one Fairfax policy that I think many of you have heard of now, but it was not heard of back then, which was the joint school board of supervisors equity policy. But that was just a framework, and that's today, right? There's still so much work that needs to be done, but so much of what we do, including things like changing admissions for TJ, which when I was on the school board, we just weren't there. We weren't there, and so I'm so glad that we're there now. But those were my goals, and to think about programs and getting the right principals in who really empower kids and the right teachers. Increasing our teacher salaries so that we can hire and keep more teachers. Many couldn't afford to live here. A smaller thing, and I think this year you saw it a little bit, that I worked on related to that was bringing back the calendar committee. So when I came on the school board, I realized that the school board, the staff would bring us a calendar that they'd already gone through a few iterations, gotten no community feedback, and they brought it to us and they told us to choose, and there was no input. And so I rebranded, had us rebrand the calendar committee, making sure that it had not just internal stakeholders, but also from our diverse communities, our, growing up here Jewish, knowing how hard it was to have to choose between celebrating my holidays and going to school. I felt that it was really important. We were behind some of the area, and understanding how do we ensure we have kids who celebrate, all kinds of holidays, and why do we still have these so centered on Christian holidays? And so, and even those are all different, right? There's so many different holidays. So that was one of the big ones, is just creating a process. And it was a little bit difficult the way it was done later through pandemic and how you do public engagement, but creating a process that had input, that created a survey that was sent to the community and brought back. And it was a small thing, but at that point we did also add starring the days on there, because even PTA is creating events, right? Knowing what's happening. And so, I'm excited to see that that conversation is continuing. I know it's a difficult one, but it's the little things like that that make such a big impact and make us feel like an inclusive and truly well-rounded, diverse community.
Oh, for sure. And to what you said earlier in terms of providing a voice for people, and at every point, to me, they're not small at all. Each of those accomplishments, it's wonderful. And in this past year, I've become more familiar with just how the school board works, or even the board of supervisors, which you're now a part of. And yeah, it's incredible the amount of work and coordination, different perspectives that have to be taken into account, and it's all about that. So now you're a district supervisor. You leveled up. Achievement unlocked.
I get to have one job now. I used to teach and do schoolwork.
Yeah, that's actually a point, because I found that to be a school board is as part-time position, which I cannot imagine how you do that as a part-time position and still have a separate job.
Yeah, this one's technically part-time, but the salary means that many of us can now do it full-time.
Wow. Well, so I mean, hearing all these different aspects of your story, like, to me, what I see is I see success and accomplishment, because there's a progression of advocacy, a progression of ability to speak and speak for the voices that may traditionally not be heard, of the immigrant, the woman, different ethnicities and things like that. So, sometimes our students may be listening and saying, wow, that's incredible. I don't know, I can't even get to TJ right now. How am I supposed to do anything like this? Or is this bar too high? So what would you say to those students?
No, it feels hard. It feels like there are a lot of firsts, right? And we're really breaking through and creating a lot of firsts. But the number one thing, and I said on the school board when I visited all of the high school classes, all of the leadership classes, I said, I've lived a lot of places, right? And there's a lot we take for granted here. There's a lot we complain about, including the traffic. But it's such an incredible community. And the number one thing that I think we do really, really well, there's always room for improvement, we do so well, is education. No matter what school you go to in this county, and even more than ever, you are going to come out absolutely prepared for the college, the career, whatever it is you choose to do. You have that. You have that preparation. You have incredible teachers who've taught you. You have incredible community members, many of us faith leaders, sports coaches, everything else. We invest so much in our education. Like, there's always more I want us to do, like early childhood, but we do a lot. And you have it in you. You just have to work hard and follow your heart and figure out where it is you want to go. And the biggest thing is to ask for help. I know we are in a very individualistic society, and we feel like people are making or broken on their own. And that's not the case, right? You have been given just by being in this community. And I know there are disparities, but you have opportunities. If there's an issue you're passionate about, learn about it. Reach out to me or any of my colleagues or our offices. The great thing about local government is you can talk to us directly. You can have a huge impact, whether it's a stop sign, a bike lane. I know Jorge and I love those. If there's an issue that you care, if there's something you want to change, there's something you're passionate about, figure out what that is. Do the hard work, do your research, put the time and effort in. I wish I had known just to coming and speaking in front of a school board or board of supervisors meeting. I never did that. I taped them, but I was too afraid. I'm happy to help you, help many people advocate. It's not rocket science. It's just about telling your story, knowing who you are, being proud of who you are, and knowing that that voice it matters. It's important. What you have to say matters, and the more thoughtful, the more researched, and the more listening you do, the better you'll be able to find the role that you want to take, and bring the skills that you have and your unique experiences and background to do whatever it is you want to do.
Well, thank you. Those are great words. I have a first audience question. Do you have aspirations of running for office again? And if so, what positions would you be interested in?
So I'm in office now. I ran, this is my second time. I had primary election and general, and I love meeting people, and now I love my job. So I get to do this. I think it's taken a lot for me to find a passion that I want to keep doing as long as the voters allow me to keep doing. So I want to keep doing this work, serving. What that means in the future, I have no idea. But right now, there's so much to learn. We are, Fairfax County, with over 1 million residents, is larger than 8 states and the District of Columbia. We have a budget that is larger than, I need to get that number, many, many states, and I believe possibly in some nations. So we do a lot here. And I just think it's really important that that I continue to serve. Excited to keep doing this as long as I feel like I'm able to bring change. If I feel like my voice is no longer the right voice, I will look for something else. I'm not here just to be here. I'm here because I do feel every single day what keeps me up at night, what gets me up in the morning, the problems I want to solve are ones I love to solve and I want to solve. And I feel like I am able to bring my experiences that at the time felt like I was all over the place doing everything, and they make sense now.
Well, I love hearing that, especially how, what's really bringing you to this work is a passion to serve, right? Like genuinely. And I really liked what you just said right now in terms of if it comes to the point where you're not the right voice, you're okay with that. Just because I think it's really key for people to understand, politicians to understand that like society changes. And so I think that's incredible to hear. Now, now you're an experienced politician, we'll say. You've been reelected. These are 3-year terms as a supervisor?
Thank goodness. Yeah.
4-year terms. So how did you learn about campaigning? You mentioned how you started door knocking for Mr. Faust, Supervisor Faust, but was it hard for you to do? What would you say? How's been your experience or your knowledge about campaigning?
Yeah, no, I have to tell you, the whole thing until I tried it sounded very strange and scary and oh my gosh, people, and I have to tell you, it is an incredible experience. And not everyone loves it as much as I do. But it was just volunteering. It really is so different than communicating as we do today on social media, on email. People, 99.99% of the time, people are really grateful that you're coming to have a one-on-one conversation with them. I'm so glad I didn't have to run during the pandemic. I would have been very different. But it really is. You just have to, I don't feel like I'm the one who's the big strategist on campaigns. I like to have people on my team and who I turn to and who love all of the very strategic part. I like having those conversations. I go in when I was teaching and running, and I switched to assistant teaching. So I didn't have, as you know, teachers have work after school and on the weekends, but I knew it's a full-time job to campaign. And so every day, Monday through Friday, after school, I went straight until it got dark, knocking on doors, having conversations, talking to people. That's the fun part. The less fun part is that you have to raise money and you have to call people and ask them for money. But when you realize that it's something you care about and people believe in you, it gets a little bit easier. But those are the big 2 things is you really need to, I think in everything you do, and especially in campaigning and running for office, you don't do it alone. It is a team effort. And so talking to people you trust, talking to experienced, successful campaigners and learning from them. And then just knowing that you are going to put in the time to get a good pair of walking shoes, a good hat for the summer, and be able to go out there and talk to people and hear from them. If that's not your cup of tea, there are other ways to help and support campaigns. and a lot of them around writing and communications and strategy and fundraising and so many different ways and so many incredible people that I couldn't have done what I've done today without them. You just see my face and you hear from me, but it is an extremely team effort.
Yeah, I like that, how you're closing on being a team effort, especially because there's so many different varied ways to communicate now. I was really impressed even how students were behind this, an initiative recently in Fairfax County to add solar panels to the schools, and they got that passed just in this past school board, which is incredible. So now in your career, that you've had a moment in which, like, I am doing the right thing. This is why. Was there a moment like that?
Yes. There's a lot that we talk about, but when starting to realize that while we say we do, a focus on diversity and equity, we know we're not there yet. And understanding that bringing that voice to the table. I have one of my colleagues who's one of the most experienced supervisors, who represents our diverse community. And sometimes some of us, we get to the point, right, where we don't want to always be telling our story and always be focusing on our background. And we know that we're more than just that, right? That's part of who we are, but we're also, right, engineers, mathematicians, anthropologists, teachers. And so we want to be accepted for everything. But realizing that, especially being at this level and being able to share your story, not just with the community, but with your colleagues, so that when a decision is being made, like one of the first meetings we had pre-pandemic, the board was considering putting in fees, fines for people who were using shopping carts outside of the supermarket, taking it outside of the supermarket. And that really got my entrañas, my guts rolled up, and I realized, this, and it's hard because, like we said, right, there were things we felt ashamed about doing and being growing up here. And I had to speak up and I said, this is how my family went to the supermarket, until my mom was finally able to learn to drive and finally able to afford a car. We took a shopping cart, walked, a few miles to the supermarket and came back. And so we say we're more in Fairfax, are we really going to find people who don't have access to transportation? And it was, and everyone means really well, but just hearing that story and being one of those decision makers at that table, having a seat at the table, and knowing that I don't just represent me, 140,000 of my constituents plus the whole county, and the population that is underrepresented from there. I think that was absolutely the first moment where you're like, this is worth it. This is where I need to be.
Wow, that's incredible. And thank you. I know that a lot of other things that you're focused on, affordable housing, and public transportation, those are all things that for me are significant things as well. And so thank you so much for that work that you do. We're gonna kick it off to a more lighthearted final lightning round right now. I'm gonna ask you I'm just gonna say some words, but you have to just pick which one of those, okay? So
okay.
One, chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, or other?
Strawberry.
All right, DC or Marvel Comics?
DC.
Okay, would you rather fly in the air, swim through the sea, or run without tiring?
Fly like on my own. Oh,
Yes.
yeah. I've always
Yes.
wanted to fly. Not in a plane, but just
Yes,
fly.
like have the power to fly, have the power to swim deep down, or run
Flying
without.
is my dream. Flying. Like
All right.
Yeah.
And my final one, this is an important one now. Car, bus, plane, train, or bike?
I think you know what mine is. La bicicleta, which was my vehicle when I lived in DC. So
Awesome. So happy to hear. So thank you so much, Supervisor Palchik, Dalia. Thank you so much. It's been so great to have you and hear this wonderful experiences that you've shared, the path that it's brought you forward to public service, and certainly the voice that you're there as a Latina, you know, as an immigrant, as a naturalized immigrant. It's wonderful to hear. We're gonna finally do a.
Can I just say one thing? Please come and see me. Those of you watching, when you're ready to run for office, I'm here to help you. All right, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Oh, for sure. And we're gonna have the Kahoot pin. It's on the panel. With attendees, please open up your Kahoot app or open up the website and put in that pin code. And I'll kick it off the game in a little bit once we have everybody logged in. And this is some questions that we covered in our conversation. All right, we got 2 people in thus far. I'm gonna give it a little bit. But yes, it's really great how, yeah, if you wanna mention a little bit more how students can volunteer or, you know, serve in local campaigns or offices, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, so absolutely, you know, things have changed during the pandemic. So, you know, like we haven't just decided how we're gonna be doing the office, the internships, but reach out, you know, to your local elected officials, school board members, state delegate. We have like 50 elected officials who represent Fairfax County. So you've got at the local level, supervisor, board of supervisors, soil and water conservation district. I hope I'm not forgetting another one. You have state delegates, state senators, and then many of you know we have members of Congress and our senators. And so just reach out, ask them, you know, if you want to help. When I first ran, I had, I think, 10 interns from TJ and other schools helping me on the campaign. It was an incredible experience. And so just try it, reach out. It really is an experience. When I realized my internships in smaller nonprofits or at the local level, you get to learn more, you get to do more, you get to really understand more of what's happening.
Thank you for that. All right, so I'm gonna hit start on the Kahoot game. And all right, we got 6 people on. Let's see, let me know if you can see it. All right, counting down 3, 2, 1, the game has started. It's a quiz. First question is, how old was Supervisor Palchik when she immigrated to the US and from which country? And I'm gonna try to share my screen so we can see what the game is showing. All right, so we 14 seconds down. So was it France? Was it Israel? Was it Colombia? I like that you mentioned the song Bicicleta. There's a song by Shakira. Oh, there we go. There's the right answer. We got 5 people right. Awesome.
Okay. Yeah, I love that song. And there's El Ángel de la Bicicleta.
Oh, I have to hear that one. Next question. Also, let's see who, everybody's tied up, but Renee's got a little bit more points. Great. All right. Next question. Which languages is Supervisor Palcik able to speak? All right. I think I got the right answer on this one because I was thinking there might be a 4th, so we'll see. But so you did French all 4 years in high school?
Yeah, so I didn't do language in middle school. I think I wanted to do German or Italian, and we didn't have enough kids. And so I started French. Yeah, I did French all 4 years in high school, and then Spanish lit also senior year.
All right, so we got everybody okay. We good contention here. All right, and so let's lead a rank. Okay, JC moved up, Laura moved down. All right, Renee still got it. Let's go with the next question. What major initiatives did Supervisor Palcik focus while serving on the school board? All right, we kind of went through this. I think we should be able to decide from this. Was it safe routes to school, school lunches, really important, standardized testing, or equity?
Well, now I do a lot with safe routes to school. We help launch that Walking Wednesdays. I'm not talking about what I did back then, but now I do safe routes to school.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's incredible how much a key part it can play in terms of students' health and well-being. All right, we got equity. Is that the right one? I think so. All right, final Kahoot here. Let's see who's got the lead. Renee still keep. Oh, Lauren moved up there. All right. answer streak. And the final question we got. What policy initiatives is Supervisor Palchik focused for the Providence district? Is it affordable housing, transportation, equity, or all of the above? I gave them a little bit of a tip here with the picture. Hopefully they can get.
So Jorge, when are you running for office?
when I can convince my wife.
It is a lot.
Yes, but I'll tell you, doing the work of just sharing is a wonderful thing. So all the above, yes, it's related.
And I have
So-
to tell you, the work you're doing in TJ, you know, we don't do this alone. So it is so incredible there are people who advocate for what they want, and doing it and creating these groups that advocate for these initiatives is what helps us do what we do, because we have to do what the constituents want. Yay!
Thank you. So celebrating Bob there, but yes, thank you so much. It's been really great to have you and have you share. And I know that the students really appreciate this really earnest, insightful, and thoughtful sharing of your experiences and what led you there. But most importantly, I think how open you are to listening to them is really incredible. And I hope that our students are empowered to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Feel free to follow me, Twitter, Facebook, at Supervisor Palchik, CPP Palchik. If you have other questions, if you want to reach out, I really want to inspire. Part of why I do this is to inspire more of you to get involved in our local policy. So please do.
Thank you so much. And Esther, did you want to say anything final for the Lewis Academy? I think
I'm actually going to kick it over to my colleague, Michelle Duell.
Hey. So thank you, Supervisor Palchik, for sharing so much of your personal journey with us and the experience of being a student when you were new to the US. That was great to hear about. I really appreciated your emphasis on asking people what they care about and then speaking for them. To me, you're a shining example of a servant leader, and the Board of Supervisors benefits so much from having someone with your experiences as a colleague. So thank you for your work. Some reminders: check out our social media on Facebook, Twitter. Now we're on Instagram, our website, and email us at info@lewisacademynow.org. Our next speaker will be Elizabeth Guzman, who's a social worker, public administrator, and member of the Virginia House of Delegates. So please register. Join us on Friday, April the 16th at 6 p.m. for that event. And until then, go in peace, ask for help when you need it, and make good trouble. Thanks, everyone.
Chao, muchas gracias. Buenas noches.
thank you. Muchas gracias. Buenas noches.